Alright guys, today what we're going to start is called Advanced Cascading Style Sheets. If you're looking at the Shirley sharing folder, there's a folder called Advanced CSS. And today we're going to look at what are called Descendant Selectors. And we're going to work through a problem together in a few minutes. Then after I finish that problem, you're going to go into here where it says Tutorial Problems. And you're going to use this folder to do a problem. And this is the actual answer. But don't look at it too quick. No, try to do it yourself first. Okay, so descendant selectors. What exactly are descendant selectors? Why are they useful? Well, to do any kind of advanced web design, you're going to have to use these things called descendant selectors. Even if you don't get the hang of them totally, if you look at somebody else's style sheet, you're going to see them and you're going to at least understand what they do. Here's a typical scenario. Let's say you're using an H1 and you're going to type something sort of in big letters, but you want it to really stand out. So there's these other words, bold, strong, that's like extra bold, that you could press. So now we've pressed both of them and you type something. Okay, and then you go, well, hold it, that looks like regular H1. That didn't make it any better than it was. And if you don't remember what H1s usually look like, I'm just going to do an H1 without the strong on it. Okay, so that didn't do much. Well, how about then when we do the strong inside of the H1, we make it red. But what if, hold it then, does that mean every strong is going to be red from then on? Well, that's no good either. Which brings us to a solution called descendant selectors. What we're going to learn today is that you can say to the computer in a cascading style sheet, listen, when I use strong, but only when I'm inside of H1 or H2 or whatever, make it red. Every other time, just keep it the same. So it's a little bit like a class, but it's more restrictive. You say, only in this situation, do what I tell you to do. Okay? So what does that H1 and H2 or whatever look like combined with a strong command? Okay, well, let's give it a try. What you do, like you usually do when you make a style sheet, is you press this, okay? But now you're not going to pick a class or an ID or a tag. You're going to pick this new one called compound. All right, so it's going to be like a combination of things. And just to give you an idea, right in here you're going to type whatever. So in our particular case, we are going to change an H1 and only when there's a strong inside of it. So it actually, you sort of read this backwards. This is saying the rule for strong is going to be the following, but only when it's inside an H1 tag. Okay, now what are we going to do? Like I said, let's just make it red. So we're going to go here, we'll make the color red. All right, and what you've just created is what's called a descendant selector. Let me show you the code underneath. All right, it's nothing spectacular, but it's now got two things instead of one. And like I told you, you read it backwards. So this says make something really bold but red, but only when it's inside an H1. All right, so let's try it out. So first of all, let me just do an H1. Okay, so I'll go up here and press H1. Okay, so that's just a regular H1. Now let me just do a regular strong. Now let me do an H1 followed by a strong. Okay, do you get it? So only when the strong is inside an H1 am I going to make it red. And you can look at inside for the code for a second. So look, this was just a regular H1. This was a regular strong. And this one is a strong inside an H1, and it follows that rule that I said, and it makes it red. Okay, now once you get the hang of that, there's all kinds of different combinations of descendant selectors that you can do. Look at the one I have on screen right now. .intro A. What exactly does that mean? How does it get used? Well, what this means is that any selector that indicates an A tag, so that's like anchors when you have like links, okay, and it has to be inside of anything. It could be a H1, a table, a paragraph, but when something applies the class intro, then that rule kicks in. All right, so it has to be inside some sort of class that used intro. Could have been, like I said, an H1, and when there's an anchor right after that, then the rule kicks in. Here's another weird one. I'll rub this one out. P and then intro and then A. Whoa, now what's going on there? Now this is a slight variation, but listen to what I have to say to explain it. So the A tag is inside anything styled as a class with the intro, but that itself is inside a paragraph. So you've got this big paragraph, let's say, and then somewhere inside of it somebody decides to use the class on some couple of words inside of there, and then that is an anchor beside it. Alright, so it gets kind of crazy after a while. You got this inside of this, but that's the basic idea. Let me give you one more. Alright, they're all kind of weird, I know, but let's take a look at one more. So p.intro, hold it, this is almost like I just did it 2 seconds ago, but this one's stuck to it. Okay, it's a little bit different. And then the anchor. So what is this one? Well, here's a quick translation. This says apply this style to every link, again that A, that's underneath a paragraph that has the intro class applied to it. So that other one that you saw a few seconds ago, that was just in a paragraph, and somewhere inside the paragraph there could have been some other class intro that had something applied to it. But this one, the paragraph itself has the intro class attached to it. Okay, now don't worry if you don't totally get it, but what you're going to start seeing are a lot of these different descendant selectors on some of the more professional free templates you're going to use, right? So they're going to be all kinds of these weird combinations. As long as you get the basic idea, you should be set. Okay, what I want to do now to finish up this quick little lesson on descendant selectors is give you a nice little recap of all the different things we've learned about style sheets up into today. Alright, so what I've done, as I always do when we do one of these examples, is I made a site already, and it's pointing to a little folder that has some pictures and a file that I'm going to load up right now. So it's kind of cool. It's a little website that I created. Now, what we're going to do using pure HTML and pure code is we're going to sneak into the underground, and we're going to type in our style sheets from here. Okay, so we're going to sneak in here, and we're going to start off, and when you make a style sheet, obviously it's style, and then you basically use this word type, and look how it's popping up as I do stuff, right? And I'm going to pick that one. We're not doing JavaScript, we're doing that one. Alright, and you press enter, and then the end of this is usually the back style like that. Okay, so we're going to put all our code in there. Alright, and we'll start off with some really basic stuff to review, and then we'll keep getting fancier and fancier. Let's do a little paragraph style first. Okay, and what we'll do with the paragraph style, we'll just do something really simple. We'll change a couple of colors, and we'll do some fonts. Okay, so here's our first tag, the paragraph tag. I've changed the color. I've picked the font family, the size, and I've indented, so all the words are going to be shifted over a little bit. Let me just give you a little preview. I'll press design, and you notice now how all the words have shifted over a little bit. Fonts look a little bit different, and we've got that first step done. Okay, next step is, what if you want to put tags to a whole bunch of things and have them have the same property? So now what we're going to do is make H1, H2, and H3, like a group of things, have a certain property. So the way you do that is you go H1, H2, H3, and then you write down whatever rules you want there. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to make the color be... Now remember these numbers here, you're wondering what they are. These are hexadecimals, okay? So the first two are the red, second two are the green, and then the last two are the blue. Red, green, and blue. Okay, and this one, I'll change the font family to this. Okay, so those are for that. Now let's take a look at what it's going to look like now. Alright, so if you notice, it looked a little bit different than last time. I did make a slight mistake here. I had this first thing in quotes and it threw off everything, but now it looks good. It's got that blue color, it's indented with that different font. If you're wondering where's that H stuff you just did, if you look at the code inside here, see this thing right there, H is how to move sod. So H1, let's find out how to move sod. So this part in here, that's an H1 right there. Okay, these ones are H2s. Alright, so those are changing the different things inside the code. Okay, let's keep going. Next thing we learned when we did styles was this thing about classes. I mean, sometimes your H1, you don't always want it to be green or a certain size. You want to change it up. So what you do is, instead of pinning yourself down to a tag, you create your own little thing, which you call a class. All right, so I'm going to create a class called .note, and that's how you make classes. You have to put that period on it, and then you do what you want in that spot. Okay, so here's our code for note. I changed the font size a little bit and the color. This is kind of neat. I do the margin. Now, usually when you do margins, there's actually 4 numbers, and usually the first number is the top, the second number is the right, the third number is the bottom, and the last number is the left. But what you can do here is, if this is the top, you're basically saying the top and bottom are 0, the margins, and the left and right, in this case, the next 2 numbers are 100, 100. So it goes in 100 a little bit from the left and 100 in from the right. Padding is 10, so it's not really stuck to the words around it. Got a nice little border on it and a background color. So now if I look at it, where'd it go? What did it do? Well, you haven't applied it to anything. So that's the thing with these classes, right? You have to apply it to something. So what I'm going to do in a second is I'm going to pick all of this in here, and I'm going to apply that class to it. Now, there's several ways to do it. You can go down here and pick it, okay? Or you can go into the pure code. If you go into the pure code, you'd have to figure out, oh, there it is right there, right? So in here, you'd have to say class equals, and you would apply it. If you want to do it in the pure code, that's great. If you want to do it right here, let's apply it right here. We'll click on note. All right, and what it got put into that box. That's kind of cool. The next kind of style sheet is what's called an ID. Now basically an ID is exactly like a class. You can apply it to anything you want. The only difference is with an ID, it can only be applied once to a particular page. Now where you use IDs a lot are when you want to wrap, like I'm going to do here, a whole section of code with a particular style. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into the code, and usually what you do is you put it, for this wrapper anyway, just after the body, and we're going to put some space here. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this thing called a div, and we're going to wrap the whole page in this code. So we're going to say div ID, and then you're going to write down whatever the wrapper is called. In this case, it's actually called wrapper. All right, so you go equal sign, and then you go wrapper. Okay, and then that's the beginning of the div, and then down at the very bottom, because you're wrapping the whole thing, you close it off. Let's take a look at what it would look like. See how it's squeezed it in? All right, here is the whole page now, and it's been squished in. And what it's done is it made it so that it's centered on any particular screen that you'd have it on. Just to review the wrapper code, this line right here tells the wrapper that my page is only going to be 680 pixels. Now your stuff might be wider than that, but we're going to squeeze it into that area. This line right here is the most important. That's what's going to center it for you. So basically it's saying that the top and the bottom margins are going to be tight 0, and the left and the right are going to be automatically centered to whatever the screen size is. Then we'll pad it a little bit, and then the border left is going to have a solid line on it, and so is the border right. And if you remember, when I looked at it, it has those little borders along the left and the right hand side. Here's our last problem. Remember how I started today's lesson? I mentioned about how we wanted to have strong, emphasize something inside an H tag, an H1 or H2 or whatever. Well, here's the situation. Only problem is, when you look at this, you don't really know that the word before is really standing out. Look at it. Before, it looks like everything else. So we got to figure out a way to get it to fix that. The way to fix it, of course, is what we call a descendant selector. And here it is right there. That's our last style sheet. And what that basically says is the strong command, when it's inside an H2, is going to be red. Let's take a look at if that's what actually happens. Look at that. There it is now. It was black before, now it's red, but only for those ones. Okay, and there's H2s in a couple of spots that used it. And that's the last idea. So we've gone from the simplest style sheet all the way to descendant selectors. Now, as I mentioned, what I'd like you to do to finish up today is take a look at a problem sheet that I gave you, and I want you basically to convert something that looks like this into something a lot more classical, something that's going to look quite stylized and looks like that. Okay, so that's your problem for today.